for. It's coming up like this next February or something like that, but my guess is that that might be in jeopardy once again.
Yeah, we were supposed to go to Africa that end of March into April, and of course it blew up, and they pushed our date out to 2021. I don't know if we'll make it. I'm hopeful. If they don't, I'm hoping maybe they'll push it one more year, but
Right.
otherwise, you deal with Africa, you pretty much lose your money when it's gone if you don't go on a trip.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's really, it's so hard on everybody. It's hard on the tour operators, and it's hard on the people wanting to go. So, I mean, who would have thought we would be in this situation? But
yeah, well, the tour operators especially, because I mean that's how they make. I mean, geez, they had no income for probably most of the year, right? I mean,
that's the problem. Absolutely, everybody's had to cancel, and then there's no revenue coming in. So.
Right. There's nobody tipping, and there's nobody spending money, and I mean they were shut down. So anyway,
yeah, it's so unfair as to how certain industries have been affected by this thing.
We were talking to the city of Lone Tree because they want to do some, like maybe do family pictures out by a Christmas tree they have for their art center, and we suggested they get a big dumpster and a big giant 2020 sign, and we can have people throwing it into the dumpster.
That's right. I think everybody will be glad to see the year go. Unfortunately, I think we're still going to have to deal with the virus for a while. So
yeah,
but hopefully we'll get the worst behind us. Boy, if one of these vaccines will work and we can get it distributed, maybe that'll turn the tide.
Yeah.
At least it provides some hope out there.
Yes.
Well, maybe not immediate time, at least it's something there, and just make sure we all stay safe between now and then.
Right, exactly.
I know right now everybody's worried about toilet paper and paper towels again.
Yes, I've noticed that when I was at Costco.
Yeah, we were at Costco, everybody had one of their cartons, and they had pallets of them, just pallets of toilet paper and paper towels. I'm like, I don't think they're going to run out anytime soon.
Well, but I was there probably a week and a half ago, and they had nothing.
Yeah, I've been there in the last.
I was there today, and they had paper towels everywhere. They were stashing them all over. They were behind the coffee. They had gotten their shipment in.
That's right.
Well,
I went to 3 stores last week trying to find some.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know Sam's Club was a little light. We were at Sam's Club a couple of days ago, but today, this morning at 9 o'clock, Costco had a lot. So
yeah,
it may be gone. Of course, Costco's got the good combination out here because we're Park Meadows, so they've got the alcohol and the toilet paper. So we are covered. And one little guy, we were walking down the road, and I said, I'll go check on toilet paper. And the guy goes, just buy wine. Just forget the toilet paper.
All right. I'll go ahead and start. We're a little bit past the hour here, 7 o'clock. So again, thank you everybody for once again joining. I was looking at this here. We've got our 15th now virtual meeting during this obviously very unusual year of 2020. As we were just talking about a few minutes ago, and that will probably be carrying this out into the first part of 2021. But hopefully there comes a day there that we can all get together and once again meet in person. Sorry about that. Camera covered there. I'm just going to go through a couple quick announcements, things that are coming up here over the next month or two, and then we'll move on to the presentation. Again, thank you, Cheryl Opperman, for presenting tonight. Really appreciate it. It's nice to have an award-winning nature photographer of your caliber in that. So thank you again for joining. I think you just came in here kind of last minute, right? Over the last couple of weeks, I think you
yes
came in. So again, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Couple upcoming things that we've got here. Let's see, December 2nd. So I guess that's just in a few weeks. We've got the awards presentation. So every year we do a formal awards presentation. Usually it's really fun to do that, obviously in person. But we will make sure that we get the awards out to those who won awards. So many great images that we had this year. So I'm really curious to see who ends up with some of the big awards for the annual points and so forth in that. So again, thank you everybody also for contributing all throughout the year. And obviously we'll be picking those back up next year on that with open categories and also some green categories. Let's see. And then we're putting together, we've got meetings that we're putting together. I don't have the presenters right here in front of me. We're still kind of working on that, but again, obviously some exciting presentations that we're scheduling for next year. We've got a few of them already lined up for the first few months. And then, like I mentioned, we also are setting up the competitions. And then we'll also, as we've done in the past, we'll also kind of offset those with occasional the exhibition nights, which are also a very good learning experience, I found. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce tonight's presenter, Cheryl Opperman. I cut out a lot of the things off of the list that I was looking at just because otherwise we'd be there through most of the night, but quite a few accomplishments that she has. As far as the things that she's been published in, the American Humane Association, Overseas Adventure Travel, the Denver Post, National Geographic Society, and Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. So congratulations on being published in those, in all of those. Other prestigious awards, National Wildlife Federation, International Photography Awards, Nature's Best Photography, the Earth Day Network. Also has been featured on a number of programs, just here locally, the 9 News of Denver, Luminous Landscape, Smithsonian Earth. Let's see, other accomplishments, the honors graduate at the Brooks Institute of Photography. And then another big one here I saw was the leading female nature photographer in Outdoor Photographer magazine. She, as she was just mentioning here, for those of us that were on here a few minutes early, she also does workshops. Hasn't had obviously a chance to do as many this year as she normally would, but some of the ones that I saw just on the website were the Denver Audubon Raptors. Down in Mexico, there's monarch butterflies and gray whales. Nebraska, famous for their sandhill cranes. It's got that workshop. And then obviously tonight's presentation is Antarctica and South Georgia Island. And then it looks like you're putting together some that may not be kind of on the list yet, but other places that you visited and conduct workshops are Alaska, Brazil, Tanzania, Bosque del Apache, Iceland, and I'm sure I'm probably missing a few in there somewhere. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cheryl. If you want to mention any special comments or if you have any special projects that you're working on currently, expand on what I just described if I missed anything, or if you want to mention anything further. And then we'll go ahead and turn it over and be as we're anxious to see your presentation tonight.
Great. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll cover some of those things at the end. I actually have them in the slide presentation. So I think we'll just dive right into Antarctica. So give me a second here and I'll get my screen share going. And we'll just make sure this works here. Is that looking right, everybody?
Yep, we can see this.
That looks great. Yeah.
You never know when you're when you're doing these things, and you end up, it's such an interesting way to present things because you don't get a lot of feedback during the presentation. So every once in a while, I like to check and make sure it's all going well. But please alert me if anything isn't working. But well, I'm so glad to be able to share this presentation with you because Antarctica truly is an amazing place to visit. And if it's not on your bucket list and you have any desire to go, I would certainly encourage you to consider a trip. And hopefully tonight I'll give you some helpful tips regardless of who you go with. I mean, obviously I lead trips to Antarctica and I'll tell you about those, but I want you to get a good sense of what it's like so that, regardless of who you go with, you have a great experience. So to start off with, tourists began visiting Antarctica in the 1950s. And just to give you an idea of how popular it's becoming and has become during the 2018-2019 season, over 55,000 people visited the continent. And I think it's getting more and more popular every year. The tourist season runs generally from November through March over its summer. Obviously, it would be way too cold to go there in the winter, so that's when ships can make it through, and it's the best time to visit for tourists. Now, when you go to Antarctica, there are, you know, a lot of different ways to go there. There are a few trips where you can fly in, but most of the trips you're going to go by boat. And if you're a photographer, the best kind of boat is going to be an icebreaker, not a cruise ship. There are big cruise ships that go to Antarctica as well, but if you go on a ship with over 500 passengers, they're not allowed to make landings at all. And in fact, I've talked to people who have gone on a trip like that, paid for it, thinking they were going to get to land, and they didn't. They just got to float by. So you definitely want to make sure that you're on a ship that's smaller. And the best ship really is a ship that holds 100 passengers or less, because those are able to make landings with everybody at once. If you have more capacity than that, then they have to break up the landings into groups. So you know, if you can go on a smaller ship, everybody can land and spend the maximum amount of time on shore, which obviously as photographers is something that's really a necessity for us. Most of these ships depart out of South America somewhere, or we depart on the trip I lead out of the Falkland Islands. Now, if you're going to go this far, I would highly recommend that you also choose a trip that visits South Georgia Island. And South Georgia Island is a British territory in the Southern Atlantic Ocean that's about, and I can't see my screen right now, but I think it's 800 miles southeast of the Falkland Islands.
Yeah, 800 miles.
Okay, thank you. It cuts off. I've got the people over here, and I don't know if I can get that screen minimized or not. But anyway, it's an island wildlife sanctuary, and it's home to penguins, albatross, seals, whales, petrels, all sorts of amazing wildlife. And it truly is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in the entire world. So snow-covered peaks, emerald color water, great wildlife. It's just a really unique, special place that's worth seeing, especially if you're going to go that far. It's accessible only by sea, and a permit's required to visit. But of course, you know, if you're on a ship, they take care of that. However, if you want to, you know, do things like drone photography, there would be special permits that would be required for that, which probably are not really practical if you're going on, you know, one of these tourist type of trips. And the temperatures generally range from 32 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. So one of the great things about South Georgia is they have these huge king penguin colonies. So this is a picture that I took with a fisheye lens, which is a really fun lens to take. And we'll talk about equipment later in the presentation. But you know, you don't have to hike in this far. The trip that I go on, they give you plenty of time on shore. So if you do want to go exploring and hike up the hill, you can. But you can get just some amazing pictures, you know, really shortly after you land, so you don't have to hike very far as well. Now, this is kind of what South Georgia would look like in more the middle of the summer. The trips that I'm going to be leading are running in late October, early November, and it's probably more likely that it's going to look like this, a little bit more snow, because it's earlier in the season. And this was a shot by Hugh Rose, who is also on the boat that I go on with Cheeseman's Ecology Safari. So, and he's a wonderful guide as well. And so this is an example of a king penguin colony that's really, you know, right next to the ocean where you land. So you can see you have access to plenty of subjects, even if you don't want to go hiking very far. And again, just another vantage point. And the king penguins look a lot, the adults look a lot like emperor penguins. Now the chicks look quite different, but the kings themselves are very close in appearance. And on some of the stops, you might even, you know, find a little waterfall, other elements that can make your images look a little bit more interesting with the wildlife. So lots of variety in the terrain. And of course, in addition to doing, you know, sort of scenic expanses, you can go and move in, which is one of the things, of course, I love to do, concentrate on portraits of wildlife. So I was able to just, use a longer lens and get some water in the background and photograph a really dramatic shot, of course, of a king penguin. And if you want to get even closer, or usually the case is the penguins come closer to you, because of course, we again want to be careful about getting too close to wildlife, but they're very curious. So you often can get very tight shots, and this is just of the feathers. So, when something comes close to you, if it's safe for you to stay there, you don't need to move off, just keep shooting, because you might get some really interesting detail photographs as well. And you also have things like fur seals, which mix in to those areas, and they're fun to photograph. And again, you've got to keep a little bit more distance. So I do recommend longer lenses, and we'll talk about that. But the wildlife is very habituated and very accessible. So you're going to have great opportunities to get relatively close to these species. This is a wandering albatross. And again, there in this particular part of the island, there are platforms from which you can stand, and so they'll be flying around, and there's a wonderful opportunity to do flight shots in addition to more portrait types of situations. This is a Gen 2 penguin, and so for this particular image, I was lying on my belly on the sand, so it's a good idea to take a blanket or something, or a sheet that you can lie down if you want to get lower angles, which are wonderful for photography. Otherwise, you get very sandy. This is a macaroni penguin, and you'll have the opportunity to see those as well. And then this is a petrel. So maybe not the prettiest, but definitely interesting. And then the watercolor is just amazing. I didn't saturate the water at all. It really is this color in certain areas. It's just beautiful. And this was a group of Gen 2 penguins swimming around. And this particular image I took from the ship, the 100-passenger ship. So, there's a lot of photography you can do from the large ship as well as off the Zodiac or when you land. So, obviously, you're going to spend some days at sea in order to get to these locations. And they're not usually long periods of time at sea, a couple of days, but it's a great opportunity to attend lectures on a variety of subjects. Most ships have naturalists, biologists, whale experts, maybe even history experts on board that will give lectures in addition to the photography lectures. And so, you can spend some time doing that. Or if you have a non-photographer partner or spouse, it gives them a chance to go to some lectures that might be more of interest to them. It's a great time for reading, editing, and relaxation. So you want to take advantage of those days that you have off at sea to take care of those types of things. I like to also spend time organizing and cleaning my photo gear on the days at sea. You can do, like I said, you can do a lot of photography also of seabirds and icebergs from the ship. So it's not as though you're going to be not taking pictures on the travel days. You definitely will want to spend some time on the deck taking pictures of the surroundings. And if you go with me, I give you exclusive time with either individual sessions or group sessions so that we can, go over techniques and I can help you edit or critique or whatever you need. So it works out really well to have that extra time. And so these are some of the things you might see on the days at sea. This is leaving South Georgia Island. So as you can see, there are lots of icebergs in the water. And as you're passing, of course, the island, you can get some really nice dramatic scenics. And you'll see lots of icebergs across your journey. I mean, not so much when you're going from the Falklands to South Georgia, but once you get a little more south, you'll see them, in every shape and size as you're floating along. Okay, and let's see. So I've had this problem before, and I apologize, I might have to just exit out and restart because it doesn't want to advance. And I don't know. Let me Let me see if I can just restart it. I don't know why it does that, but it just sometimes, there we go. Okay, back.
Sometimes there will be a lag with Zoom, and so maybe it was just that, where every once in a while it glitches, but.
Yeah, it does sometimes. So anyway, but not a big deal. So this again was just on one of the travel days, and this was a huge, gigantic iceberg, as you can tell because of the size of the penguins that are they're standing on it in the water.
Your screen needs to be reshared, I believe.
Oh, does it? Okay, hold on. Let me share it here.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Okay,
yep.
now we. Okay, so maybe do I need to go back? Did you see that?
We saw that one.
Okay.
We saw that one.
Okay, good. So great. All right, we're at the chin strap penguins. So, you know, you have plenty of opportunities to do some really fun photography along the way. And really, these icebergs are just incredible. They're massive. It's hard to even describe or even really capture in a picture. I mean, the penguins do give it some scale, but to see it in person is really a totally different thing. And again, you know, it's a great opportunity just to do a lot of different compositions, and sometimes you can get a bird flying through or some wildlife in with it. So lots of great things to do photographically. And you'll even see different patterns and colors in some of the icebergs. So that's a nice thing to watch for as well. They're not all just the same. You get these sort of levels. And if you're really, really lucky, you will come across one of these deep blue icebergs, and they're really incredible to see. Usually if a ship finds one of these, they will announce it to everybody so that you can go out on deck. And on this particular voyage, they drove around it several times so that we could take pictures. So you get a lot of different angles, and you know, you can kind of focus in on the whole thing, or as I like to do, kind of narrow my way down to a more abstract sort of shot. So this was one of my favorite shots from that particular situation. So the peninsula itself is 800 miles northward, a northward extension of Antarctica. And it's actually claimed by the United Kingdom, Chile, and Argentina, but it's really governed under treaty. So they can argue about who owns it, but it is governed under treaty. So everybody has access to it under the terms of the treaty. It's the warmest part of the continent, which is why it's so good for tourism. And it's home to breeding grounds for penguins, seabirds, and seals. The temperatures on the peninsula range from 16 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, generally speaking, in the summer. And so when you get to the peninsula, again, you're going to have, you know, land, but you're also going to have a lot of icebergs. And you do a lot of zodiac cruising to see, you know, both wildlife and scenery along the peninsula. And you'll get to land as well and walk around, but you can get some really amazing photographs just by doing zodiac cruising. And the bays are usually very calm. I mean, if the weather's bad, obviously that might prevent you from going out one day, but when you get a day like this, it makes for wonderful pictures. And you can get, again, another sense of scale, you know, by looking at the little zodiac with all the people there, and you can see the massive size of these pieces of ice. So this is a tighter shot of a zodiac, and of course you wear your life jacket, and you can shoot from the boat. Usually I take a waterproof bag, and I'm going to talk about those later as well, to kind of keep my gear in as you're traveling, you know, from the boat to the cove. But once you get out and the water's calm, you just get your lens out, and hand holding is really, of course, the only practical way to photograph from the zodiac. But with, you know, a shorter lens, you can get some really nice images that way. So if you're lucky, you'll get to see some whales very close up to your zodiac. And you know, with a day like this, with the light, it's just an amazing experience to see these sorts of creatures so close to you. And here again, you know, you have to look really close in this shot because the zodiac is in the lower left corner and it's really, really small. So you can see that this is a gigantic iceberg. And when you think about it, 1/3 of the iceberg is above water and 2/3 is below. So that's a lot of ice in the water. And then there's, snow-covered mountains. So you can photograph wildlife, scenics, lots of variety. And again, I like to, when you get closer to some of these formations, you can do more abstract sort of shapes and patterns. Now, when you land, often you'll get to walk through the breeding colonies. And this is a Gentoo penguin colony where there were some little chicks. And so that was a really nice opportunity. And again, I mean, not every day is going to be sunny. You're probably going to get a variety of weather, but you can do a lot in different kinds of light. It was obviously starting to snow a little bit on this particular day. And this chinstrap penguin, again, was in the snow. But for this shot, I tried to find a little bit darker background as I was positioning myself so that I could really make those snowflakes stand out. And this is back to a sunny day, which is always nice to have. And this is an Adelie penguin, just standing on a mound of snow. And you'll see things like kelp gulls, so lots of different kinds of birds as well, not just penguins, but of course, probably penguins are the most popular. And this is a Gentoo penguin with a glacier behind. And you will get to see, quite a few glaciers as well while you're floating around. And often you'll see, these little smaller icebergs where the penguins tend to gather. It makes just a nice place for them to rest. So, you'll see the large ones as well as these smaller melting icebergs along the way. Now, it is really fun to watch the penguin behavior because they will literally just come shooting up out of the water onto the iceberg. It's incredible. And usually you'll have more than one doing it. So if you see, one doing it and you kind of line yourself up and wait, you can capture, subsequent penguins jumping up. But it's really something to see how far they can jump out of the water. And it's also a lot of fun to watch them going into the water. And most people accuse me of photoshopping this, putting extra penguins in, but this is actually 4 penguins lining up to go into the water. So they don't often do this quite so perfectly for you. A lot of times they're in a little larger group, but patience and persistence and all of those things really paid off. And this was a wonderful moment. And then you don't want to forget to do, overall scenics too. I mean, it's nice to get tighter shots, but if you can show the wildlife with the massive icebergs behind them, it gives you a really nice sense of place. And then you have the penguins again providing that scale so you can see how big those icebergs really are. And you'll see Weddell seals as well. And again, I photographed this one from a Zodiac, so I didn't have a particularly long lens on, but you can get relatively close in the Zodiac to many of these creatures. And it's nice to think about, converting things to black and white too. We don't always have to just think in color. So this made a particularly nice black and white shot with a very nice pose, obviously, it was giving us there. And the icebergs themselves are so interesting to photograph, all different shapes and sizes and patterns. And again, the color of the water is just amazing. I mean, it's really something to see in person as well. You'll also, when you have a chance to land, there are some places where there are kind of old abandoned ships. And so if you like doing other types of photography, that's a great opportunity too. And you'll have these rusted out sections of the ship. And this day it was raining really hard, so I had to take my umbrella and I used a polarizer to help get rid of some of the reflections, but it made for a really nice, interesting kind of abstract shot. So I want to take you through some of the clothing you'll need and the equipment that you're going to need if you choose to go to Antarctica. And so like anywhere else you might go, you really do need to wear layers for varied weather. And weather, I think, almost anywhere is getting more unpredictable these days. So you know, even if you're going to Antarctica and you think it's going to be cold the whole time, you know, we had rain when we were in South Georgia, so just plan for everything: rain, snow, wind, sunshine. There is quite a bit of wind as well, so you want to make sure that the jackets you have do have some wind protection. Having a waterproof outer layer works really, really well because you are around the water a lot. And when you're getting in and out of the Zodiac, you will sometimes have to step into water. Now, they really try and do a pretty good job of getting you onto land, but you know, if it's rough water or something, oftentimes I found it just easier to step into a few inches of water. So when I go, I wear fishing waders in muck boots, and I'm going to show you a picture of what the muck boots look like. But fishing waders or some sort of waterproof pant work really well if you're willing to step into some of the water, and there may be times where you just have to. A waterproof jacket with lots of pockets is also useful because you also can get some, you know, splash or spray as you're riding around. So again, they're going to try and keep you as dry as possible, but you want to be prepared that you could get splashed a little bit. And I like lots of pockets because I can put my hard drives and extra batteries and all those things into the pockets. Just really learn your pockets, because when you have too many pockets, you know, oftentimes you're fumbling around thinking, which pocket did I put that battery in? So make sure you kind of assign pockets before you go. I cannot photograph in the cold for very long without hand warmers, or I'm starting to use actually the battery operated heated clothing and gloves. And I tried these years ago and they did not work well, but some of the newer technology and the better batteries are making those things really feasible for keeping your body and your hands warm. But if not, I usually always take the air activated disposable hand warmers. You know, I'd like to get away from that and use something that's more, you know, renewable, but they do work very well. And I just, you know, I get cold very easily, so I have to have something to keep my hands warm. A hat and face covering for the wind is really essential too. And like I said, you know, they do get a lot of wind, so it's important to just be prepared for it. And then muck boots that are insulated, and muck boots are rubber boots, and I've got a picture of what I wear so you can see that. But they're just rubber boots that go kind of just, you know, below your knee, and they keep all of the water out, and they're comfortable enough for me to hike around in. I mean, you know, I wouldn't want to go 10 miles or 20 miles in them, but you know, you can hike a mile or two and still be okay if you get a pair that fits pretty well. And then on South Georgia, if you really want to go hiking, snowshoes are nice as well, but they will have some snowshoes, at least on the ship that I'm going on, so you don't necessarily have to bring your own. And of course, this is with not very much snow, but you can see everybody's, you know, not overdressed. It's not quite as cold as people would think it's going to be. You know, people get real concerned about getting too cold, and honestly, it's kind of like a Colorado winter usually. So, you know, unless you got some, you know, a storm or something, you know, if you just dress like you would if you're going to the mountains or going skiing or something, you're going to be fine. It's also not a bad idea in Antarctica to wear brighter colors. You know, when I'm photographing wildlife in other areas, of course, I'm always telling people, you know, wear muted colors or camouflage so that you blend in better. But in Antarctica, the brighter colors are fine. And then if you happen to be wandering around and you've lost track of time, you're a little easier to spot if we have to come find you. So, and it's very easy to get distracted and lose track of time. There's so much to see and photograph. So I thought I'd go over just a few rules. And of course, these are going to vary from ship to ship. But on the ship that I go on, there's no smoking allowed. It's just not practical to allow smoking anywhere. So if you are a smoker, it's probably not the trip for you. But hopefully, you know, hopefully you could stop for that long to make the trip. It's well worth it. Again, drones are really tricky. They really don't allow them without special permits, and those are just going to be difficult to get. So it's better just not to not to bring them. Whenever you go anywhere, but especially to a place like Antarctica, you've just got to be prepared for the unexpected. And, you know, normally things go just fine, but you are far away from, you know, facilities, and it's not like you can run to the grocery store and pick up a prescription or anything. So just make sure that you have all your medicines with you, and you know, everything you might need, a good first aid kit. They do have a doctor on board, so they're really good about helping people. In fact, people who on my trip who didn't bring enough seasickness medicine, they had that for people. So they do a really good job, but just be aware that you need to make sure you bring the things that you know you're going to need on the trip. And evacuation insurance is a must. In fact, they require it. So I always recommend that in addition to evacuation insurance, you just get comprehensive travel insurance. And I think after COVID, people are learning more about how important that is. And, you know, while some policies don't cover pandemics, there are policies who, you know, will cover things like quarantines. They'll cover if you get sick from COVID. So when you're looking into insurance plans, just be sure to read the fine print or talk to the company where you're going to buy your insurance so that you understand what is covered and what isn't covered. And I work with Insure My Trip for this reason, so that they can help advise people. So if you are shopping for a policy, you can go on my website. On any of my trip pages, there's a link to Insure My Trip, and you can just call them up and explain what you're doing, and they'll help advise you as to what insurance policy might be best for you, especially during, you know, the time we're facing now, where COVID is now a known event, and there are going to be some limitations probably on what they cover. You know, you want to follow all staff instructions while you're on board. That's pretty self-explanatory. This is a really important rule that they're going to have on any ship you would go on, and that's to keep the gear clean of dirt and organic material. And it's because nearly 200 non-native species have been brought to Antarctica by people. So they're really trying to, you know, not add more and not spread things from one location to another that haven't been spread around yet. So when you go and you land, when you come back on the ship, they always clean off your boots, they spray them off, and you have to step in a water bath. And oftentimes they'll also have you vacuum all of your gear out before you go to the next landing site. So it's something that we do have to be really careful of. Obviously, and this is true, again, whenever you're going to a sort of fragile area, if you can avoid stepping directly on the vegetation, that's really helpful as well. And then just generally respect wildlife, which I think we all do, but it's just a good reminder to think about what we can do just to make wildlife more comfortable as we're going into its habitat to visit it and photograph it. So as I said earlier, penguins are very curious, and they do have distance regulations in Antarctica. So it depends, they change. I've seen them anywhere from 16 to 25 feet away from penguins as a rule, where, you know, that's the distance you're supposed to try to keep. However, oftentimes the penguins just come up to you, and that's a little problematic if you're, you know, comfortable like this photographer is sitting down. It's hard to move around, but you know, again, it's just the idea of making sure the wildlife's comfortable and moving slowly and trying to respect a reasonable distance. But you know, 16 to 25 feet is really close, much closer than we're able to get to most wildlife when we go to a national park in the US, let's say. So your fitness level, if you're going to go to Antarctica, really doesn't have to be great. I mean, it's really easy to moderate depending on your activity choices. So at a minimum, you really need to be able to walk up and down stairs. You need to be able to transfer in and out of zodiacs. You've got to be able to carry your own gear and pass your gear you know, to the people who will be helping you get in and out of zodiacs. And then you've got to be able to navigate, you know, uneven, rocky, and sometimes slippery terrain if you're going to go ashore. So, you know, as long as you can do those things, you're going to be able to enjoy the trip. And then if you're in even better shape, you can go on long hikes and that sort of thing. But it's not particularly demanding. You just have to be careful, of course, when the boat is rocking around. And because we're on an icebreaker, not a cruise ship, it does tend to rock a little bit more in open seas than, you know, if you were going on one of those bigger cruise ships. So you just have to watch your, you know, grab the handrails and just be careful as you walk around. So I always am asked about seasickness because I now will tell you, I get really seasick myself. So the first time I went, I was really concerned about it. But it's only a problem during open ocean crossings. Once you get into the bays, there's just enough protection that you just don't have a lot of movement. So the Drake Passage can be rough. It's the place where you probably would have the most potential to have rough seas. Now, when I went, it wasn't bad at all, but it can be. So, you know, just so you're prepared that you can have a few days where you might get seasick. But please don't let the fear of seasickness deter you, because it would be an awful shame to miss this. The experience is well worth a few unpleasant days. And there's a lot we can do nowadays to minimize the effects of seasickness, which I'm going to talk about. So, you know, certainly talk to your doctor about prevention and treatment, but I'll give you a few tips of, you know, sort of what to ask. There are some very good prescription and over-the-counter drugs that can help. So, you know, be sure when you talk to your doctor to go over all of the various options, because there are quite a few more than there used to be. And, you know, some people have used the little patches that you put behind your ear, and those work really well for some people. I could not use those because they ended up blurring my vision. And of course, as a photographer, that doesn't work very well. But I was able to find a different anti-nausea drug that works really well for me. So, you know, be sure to talk to your doctor about the different options and the side effects. And maybe, you know, you want to test something before you go down to make sure you don't have a side effect, or take a couple of different types of medication just in case, because again, you know, it's hard to have access to those things once you're there. You do need to really take the medicine before you feel sick for it to work. If you start to get seasick, it's hard for the medications to work. So I just take it when I know we're going to be going on a sea day. I just take it at regular intervals based on the directions, and I do really very, very well. And again, ask about those side effects so that if you want to have a couple of different types or you want to test in advance, you can. So there are other types of prevention options as well that may or may not work for you. So there are alternative treatments, things like wristbands, ginger supplements. You know, people swear by these things, and if they work for you, there's nothing wrong with that. If you can avoid alcohol, caffeine, and spicy foods, that may help a lot in the prevention of seasickness. So it's maybe not as much fun, but it can help. Eating foods high in protein can also be helpful. It's important to stay well hydrated, and it's, you know, I tend to not drink enough when I go on these trips, so we'll try and remind you, because I need to remind myself as well. But if you get dehydrated, that will contribute to seasickness, and it's also just, you know, generally bad for your health overall. So make sure you drink plenty of fluids. And getting fresh air, and if you do feel seasick, watching the horizon can sometimes be helpful. So if if it's not too rough, and you can go out on deck and get some fresh air, but if it's too rough and you need to stay inside, the other thing you can do, which I like to do, is I like to just go lie down and keep my eyes closed and nap if I can. But again, the medications really help me a lot. So I have been able to solve a lot of my seasickness problems just with those. And then if you're really, really worried about it, try and choose a cabin that's in the center of the ship, because it's not going to move as much as the cabins that are on the ends. So, of course, we're going there to take pictures. So I want to go over the camera gear that I would recommend so that you're well prepared to get the kind of images you want. Obviously, you're going to need to take a camera body. And I always recommend that you take two so you have a backup. In Antarctica, if you have a third one, you might even want to take that. especially it just depends on if you're accident prone or not too. On my trip, we had one guy who actually dropped his camera off of a higher deck. So that doesn't happen very often. And if you're careful, it's not going to happen at all. But it's a good idea, because even if you had some sort of malfunction or something with your camera gear, it's not like we can FedEx one in. So just make sure you have a backup camera body. I like to have the extra one without the battery grip just to reduce weight. But that's sort of a personal decision. So I take one with the battery grip and one without. And then always bring your camera manual. And you can bring either the printed version or an electronic PDF or even a phone app. But it's really hard for me or one of the other photographers on the trip to help you if they don't know your camera body. So that's just generally a good idea anytime you go on a photo trip or workshop. So I take different kinds of lenses depending on the trip. So for Antarctica, what I like to travel with is the 200 to 400 f4. It's a great range. I mean, you can get so close to the penguins, you don't really need an extreme long lens. If you want to take one, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think the 200 to 400 is the perfect range for this type of a trip. I will take a 1.4 teleconverter that just extends it a little bit if I want to. And then a 70 to 200, 2.8, or the 100 to 400, something in that range is also nice, especially when you're shooting from the Zodiacs. Those are really good focal lengths for the Zodiacs, and they're easy to handhold and not huge, so they don't get in everybody else's way. You're also definitely going to want a more scenic lens. So a 24 to 70 or a 16 to 35 would be really good choices as well. And then specialty lenses can be a lot of fun to take along if you have room. So a macro lens might be something you'd want to take. I mean, there are interesting things that you could photograph on the ground if you like to do that sort of thing. A tilt shift lens, for the bird colonies, if you want to do a scenic and you can lay that plane down on the colony of the birds, that could be really useful as well. So again, especially if you have sort of limited depth of field, it's nice to be able to control your plane of focus and get better depth of field a little wider open. So that's something to consider if you have a tilt shift lens. And then I love to take the fisheye. Fisheyes really work best when you can climb up to a higher elevation and look down. That's where you get that nice curvature look. So, they're usually lightweight and not difficult to carry. So I always try and throw that into my bag. Rain covers are really sort of essential, and you can get, a nice, sewn rain cover, or I like to just use the Optech, and they're basically kind of like a plastic bag, and they're not one-time use. You can use them over and over again, so you don't have to be wasteful about it, but they're inexpensive and they work well, and they're small and compact, so they're easy to stuff in your camera bag. And then filters, I use Breakthrough filters. That's the brand of filter that I like to use, but any brand is fine. But there are always two filters I like to pack in my bag. One is a circular polarizer, which works really well in these kind of situations. And especially as I was talking about taking some of the reflections off of the boat, or, even reflections that you get on the water or on the icebergs. So it can be really useful. And of course, it'll darken your skies, make those bluer in certain situations also. And then neutral density, if you have situations like the waterfall picture that I showed you earlier, sometimes you need neutral density to help you slow that shutter speed down enough to get the blur that you want. So those are the two filters that I generally like to pack. Now, tripods. I love using tripods. A lot of people handhold nowadays, but I think there are really huge advantages to tripods. I mean, oftentimes if you're on a tripod, you can shoot at a much slower shutter speed than you would be able to hand holding. So, I like to keep my noise as low as possible and shoot as slow as I can for the situation so that I'm not having to boost that ISO a lot. So a tripod really allows me to do that when I'm on land. So for the landing days, I always take my tripod out. And one thing I try to tell everybody is a good tripod is well worth the money. I think, you know, when people are starting out, a lot of times they try to save money on their tripod. And the thing is, a tripod really doesn't change that much over time. So if you spend a lot of money on a really good tripod to start off with, you can use that tripod through your whole photographic career. So don't skimp on the tripod, in my opinion. And make sure it's going to be sufficient for the weight of the lens that you're going to carry or that you're eventually going to carry. So, you know, it's nice to have a lighter tripod when you're hiking around, but, you know, actually having some weight to the tripod is an advantage. We're using a tripod for stability. So if the tripod is too lightweight and too flimsy, then it's not going to be as stable. So you want to make sure that you get a stable tripod for your purposes. And then pay attention to the height of the tripod. Oftentimes people buy tripods that go up to eye level, and that's great because it is very comfortable often to shoot at eye level. But if you have a hill or something and you need to put one leg down further, if you can buy a tripod that's taller than you, that gives you some flexibility. And you also might want to think about, if you like to get lower angles and lie on the ground, you want to make sure that you can do that with your tripod. So if it has a big center column, you know, that's going to prevent you from getting the low angles. So think about all of those considerations when you're choosing your tripod. And then monopods can be really useful when you're shooting from the ship. I mean, you could set up a tripod on deck as well, but monopods are just a little bit easier to manage, and they give you a little more stability than hand holding, and also help to reduce some arm fatigue and things if you're going to be out there for a while. So I usually take a monopod with me as well. Now, if you're shooting with the longer lenses like the 200 to 400, I really like to use a gimbal style head, and I've been using Wimberley for years. It is a little heavier head, but again, I mean, weight can be an advantage. So I don't mind packing it. I just take it apart and pack it in my clothes. You know, I'm going to talk about some other options if you're concerned about the weight of the Wimberley. But the Wimberley, if you have a longer lens, a little heavier lens, I think it works exceptionally well. Now, I do like to use all gimbal style heads with a leveling base. And if you've never used a leveling base with a gimbal head, it really will change your life because it makes leveling so much easier. If you don't have a leveling base and you put the gimbal style head directly on your tripod, the only way to level is to adjust each of the 3 legs independently, which takes a lot of time, especially if you're moving a lot. When you have a leveling base, it's kind of like having a ball head below your gimbal head, and it allows you to just turn that and level with one motion instead of having to worry about every leg. So you can get the legs close, but they don't have to be perfect, and then you just adjust the leveling base. So I think it's a must-have if you're going to use gimbal style heads. And then, you know, I don't even worry about taking different heads for scenics anymore. I just use my gimbal style head with one of these plates, and you just put the camera into the plate, and that slides into the gimbal, you know, mount, so that you can use the camera facing forward. Because of course, with the longer lenses, we're mounting the lens to the head instead of the camera body. So that solves the problem, and then you don't have to worry about having different kinds of heads along. So, and for my tripods and my leveling base, I really do like Really Right Stuff. They make fabulous gear. There are other brands that make leveling bases, so you can certainly look into those, but I found the Really Right Stuff leveling base to be the best I've ever used. Now, if you already are using a ball head for scenics and you have one, and you don't want to spend a lot of money on a gimbal head, you can also buy a sidekick, and it will turn your ball head into a gimbal style head. So that's a really good option for people. And then it works you have to side mount the lens, but it works just the same way a regular Wimberley head would work. Now, if you don't have really heavy lenses, and I do recommend this a lot to people who are going mirrorless, where even the longer lenses are not as heavy, you can choose this really unique little head from Acrotech called a panoramic head. And as the name implies, it was really designed for scenics and stitching panoramas. But it's also a really good gimbal style head that can be used with long lenses for flight shots and things like that as well. And again, Acrotech also makes a leveling base and a plate that you can use to attach a camera. But I can use this. This is sturdy enough a head. I can use it with my 600 f4. And it's also, as I said, excellent for doing scenics and panoramas. Again, you really want to use the leveling base so that you can level one time instead of having to adjust every leg. But this is much smaller and more compact, much easier to pack. So I actually, when I go on trips to Antarctica, I end up taking this head as a backup head, just in case. I can't imagine what could happen to the Wimberley unless I lost it. But you know, if I did need a backup head, this is the one I take. Now, camera bags, there are a lot of options for camera bags, and you will be, you know, having to lift your camera bag, you know, in and out of the boat. So the lighter the gear you can take, the better off you are. So I try to eliminate weight in my camera bag. And if I know I'm just going to be going with a long lens and maybe a couple shorter lenses, these long lens backpacks work really well. They're smaller, they're narrower. So it's a little bit easier to move in and out of the boat. So it's a very, very good option. And then you can just add some pouches for extra lenses and things if you need to. So that's one option for camera bags. And it does help to minimize the size and weight. But probably my favorite camera bag for Antarctica are these Mindshift Backlight series bags from Think Tank. And the reason that they're so excellent is that you can access the gear without ever setting the bag on the ground. The way they've constructed these, you can just twist them around like you can see in the picture, and the gear is accessible from the back. So you just open it up, you put a little strap around your neck to hold it open, and then you don't ever have to set your gear on the ground. And that's really nice because there's, you know, when you're walking around the colonies, there unfortunately is just a lot of bird poop on the ground, and you don't really want to set your bag on the ground if you don't have to. So they make them in different sizes. You want to buy the smallest bag that you're going to need to fit the gear that you'll take to shore. And if if you have some questions, you can certainly call them and talk to them. And I do, if you order, I have all of these products on my website too under the shop tab, but if you order through me, they also give you a free gift. So you can follow my link and also get a little free extra bag or battery carrier or something along with your purchase. But it's an excellent bag. You can also put the rain fly on it and just leave it on if you want to. So if you do set it on the ground, the rain fly is going to get dirty and you can just wash it later. So it's a really versatile bag and probably the best bag for this kind of a trip. And as I said, if you follow the link on my website, you get an extra gift. So that's kind of nice. They're very supportive of photographers too, which we really appreciate. So they just make good gear. So I also recommend taking protective waterproof bags, and I'm going to explain exactly what I use. But basically, it's one that fits over your photo backpack, and it keeps essentially all of your gear completely waterproof. And I've got a picture of this in the next slide so you can see what it looks like. But I like to use the Sea to Summit hydraulic dry packs, and it's basically just a big rubber bag that you fit your camera gear into, and then you roll and snap into place. And as long as you didn't, submerge it or throw it out into the ocean, and even if you did, it would probably be fine for a couple of minutes while you retrieve it, which is most likely not going to happen. It never happened to anybody on our trip. So you'd have to be in a really bad situation if you dropped your bag into the water, but it is protective. So if water's splashing into the Zodiac, it's going to keep your gear dry as you're transporting, especially on rougher days back and forth to shore. So I like to pick a bright color just in case it went overboard. It would be easier to see. Again, I think that's highly unlikely. And then if you really want extra protection, you can also use water resistant bags inside your photo backpack. And I'll show you a picture of those as well. So I use the Sea to Summit Evac Dry sacks, and they're just small little sacks that you can roll your camera gear into. And, you know, I actually use these more when I go to Alaska and I'm doing river crossings where, you know, I'm not confident about my footing and I think there's a chance I might, you know, kind of fall into the river. So it would just give me a little extra protection for the gear. So if you know, if you're really worried about it, you can do sort of these double protective layers. But you just wrap each piece of equipment in its own bag, and they're not waterproof, but again, if you fell or something as you were crossing a body of water, it would probably help to really protect the gear. So this is the dry pack, which is the rubbery waterproof bag that I put my camera bag into when I'm going back and forth in the Zodiac. And again, it's, you know, it's really protective of the gear, and it has backpack straps on it, so it makes it easier to carry. And once you get to shore, you know, in almost all the locations, you can just leave that gear. You could even take a different set of shoes if you wanted to. And you could just leave all of that gear on shore and then come back and put it back on when you're ready to go back to the boat. So you don't have to carry it around with you the entire time you're out photographing. And then this is the Sea to Summit EVAC dry sacks that you could use to wrap your gear inside if you really want that extra layer of protection. I do not do this in Antarctica, but I just want you to know it exists. It is something I do, like I said, in Alaska. So, and then the last thing I'm going to recommend you pack, if you want to, this is sort of optional, but for me, it's essential. I think it's the most important thing to pack, and that's some chocolate. It's, again, really hard to get good chocolate when you're in Antarctica. So make sure you take whatever those snacks are that you love to have in your bag, you know, make sure you take those along. So I'll just give you basically the trip highlights of what we do. And I have trips going in 2021, and I was full, but because of the pandemic, some people have opted to switch to 2022. So if you are interested in going in 2021, it's in October, about close to the same dates. There are spaces available. So just email me and let me know, and we can talk about it. I really think the 2021 trip will go. I think by then we'll have enough vaccines that we'll be able to travel again. I'm hoping. If not, they will just move people to future trips. So there's really no risk in signing up for 2021 if you're anxious and you're ready to travel. So just, you know, let me know. But there's also the October 2022 trip and possibly a 2023 trip. So if you're interested in anything, you can certainly just email me and I can help advise you. But on the trips that I go on, we go to South Georgia Island for 6 full days. And again, they really spend as much time on shore as possible, which is really helpful. And then they spend 6 full days on the Antarctic Peninsula as well. So, you know, if you're researching trips, you really do want to know how many days do they spend at each location and how much time do you get to land, because some companies are better than others. And I definitely go with a company that gives you as much time as they possibly can on shore. You'll get to photograph 5 penguin species, whales, seals, albatross, and seabirds, of course, in addition to, you know, beautiful scenery. And then you can also learn from the 15 polar specialists, naturalists, and other photographers on board. So there are a lot of people to help you, and a lot of people that are there in case you have a spouse or partner that doesn't like to photograph. It's a great trip to go on with somebody who's not a photographer too. And you pay the same price as other passengers do, but if you go with me, you have exclusive access to me. So I do individual sessions, instruction, and guided walks, and it's not costing you anymore. And the nice part about it is the deal I've worked out with them, I don't have to worry about all 100 passengers. I just have to worry about my group. So you get a little more personalized attention than you would if you just went on the trip, not as a part of my group. So there are also itinerary extensions that you can consider. So, and these trips generally run both with Antarctica if you want to do it as an extension or as a standalone trip. And one would be the Falkland Islands. which is just beautiful, and then Patagonia as well. And I basically create these itineraries sort of on demand. So if enough people that are going to Antarctica want to go, then I can put together an extension. Or if people are generally interested in these locations, then we might add on an extension. And we're talking about doing a Patagonia extension or trip. It could be a standalone trip also in 2022. So again, if you're interested in any of these things, just let me know, because a lot of times if I get enough people that are interested in a destination, whether it's in Antarctica or Patagonia, or if it's somewhere else in the world, I can put together a trip based on demand. And again, if you just contact me directly, or if you're talking directly to the ship operator, you can always request my trip as well. So this was from the Falkland Islands, just to give you an idea of something that you might be able to photograph on an extension there. And this is an albatross colony, again with my fisheye, which is really fun to use on the Falkland Islands. So anyway, I'll just sort of wrap things up here. I wanted to tell you about a few other things I'm working on and some of the other trips I offer quickly, so that you're aware of those. And obviously everybody's virtual right now, so trips have not been running. I've been doing a few local things. I'll tell you about some of those, but I have canceled pretty much everything for 2020 that I was hoping to do just because of the pandemic. But I am trying to do some virtual things. And one of the things I'm helping with this year is the Colorado Environmental Film Festival photo contest and exhibition. So it's a great local contest. It is international. It's open to photographers from around the world, but we get a lot of local entries and we put together an exhibition. And we've got a $1,000 cash grand prize this year, plus a lot of prizes from these other great companies. My good friend Russ Burden is going to be the judge this year. I judged the competition last year. So, I'd really encourage you to enter if you have some images that fit into our categories, and there are quite a few: landscape, wildlife, indigenous cultures, environmental impact, and patterns and abstracts. So a lot of fun things to enter. And it's also a great not-for-profit organization. And then I'm also, I'm trying to do only outdoor things in small numbers locally right now. So we did one of these in October and it was very successful, but I work with a couple different raptor education not-for-profits here in Colorado, and Nature's Educators is one of them. They're down by Canyon City. And so we're doing these photo shoots these are not workshops. So I also do Denver Audubon, which I'll talk to you about a little bit, but these are more, you come and you just shoot all day and I help you in the field with photo tips. If you want really in-depth photo instruction and classroom time, then I would suggest you sign up for the Denver Audubon Raptor Workshop. But these are really great ways to go out and photograph in a safe outdoor environment. We do, of course, require masks and everything else, and we're social distancing, but they've been working really well. And it's a great way to support Nature's Educators, which is really struggling during the pandemic because they do so many programs for schools and those have canceled, or they're having to do them virtually, and virtually is just not as, it doesn't generate as much revenue as doing things in person. So we're all sort of struggling and trying to come up with ways to, keep things going until everything returns back to normal. So that's a great opportunity. And then of course I do the Raptor Photo Workshop with HawkQuest, which is another great organization here in Colorado that takes care of birds that have either imprinted or cannot be released into the wild. And this is a very in-depth classroom with practice in the field sort of workshop. So if you really want to learn in detail how to master bird photography, this is a great program that again helps support two not-for-profits. So
hey Cheryl, that date is 2019.
I'm sorry, yes, and I have not updated the slide yet. Thank you for pointing that out. I have not updated the slide yet because we don't quite have our 20 and this is an old slide, but anyway, I will update the slide to 2021 at some point. But for now, if you're interested, we run it every either end of September or early October of every year. So we just don't have our dates yet for 2021. So just, again, reach out to me and I will let you know as soon as we do have the actual dates.
Thanks.
And then, you know, you mentioned earlier at the very beginning, you know, I do have trips on the schedule for 2021. And again, this is, you know, it's really tricky because we don't know what's going to happen. So all of these trips are flexible, meaning if they don't run, if you sign up and they don't run in 2021, we're just going to move them to 2022. So there's really literally no risk to signing up. We're not going to even ask for, you know, we're not going to be sending money over to the suppliers or anything until we know we can go on the trips. So we're hoping we can run Mexico Monarchs in February. But again, if it doesn't run this year, we'll run it next year. We're going to do Iceland in July. I'm planning trips for Tanzania, Africa in May and September. And then of course, Antarctica runs in October and November. So I also do private tours and instruction if you're interested in that. So I would just say, if you're interested in anything, any trips, or even if you have ideas for other trips, please just feel free to email me because it's the easiest way for me to know what people want to do. And then I can help you get matched to the right trip or even put a trip together. So,
Great.
anyway, I'd be glad to take any questions.
We got a couple of questions and then people can talk, but one is, how long are the days during the periods that you go? I mean, obviously Alaska during the summer is long days. Is that true in Antarctica?
Well, so yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, it does depend on the trip, but to do photography, really, we want to be up early. And I think I have let me turn my camera back on here for you. You know, we want to be up early for the best light and we want to stay out, you know, for the best light. So depending on where you go, the days can be really long. I mean, for instance, Iceland in the summer, you know, that can get really tricky because they have so much light that sometimes you're just sleeping when you can. And if the weather breaks, you jump up and go out and photograph and come back and just, you know, try and fit things in as you have to. Now in Antarctica, you will get, you know, some normal sleep. But again, you're going to be, you know, you're going to be up early when the sun comes up and you're going to be wanting to photograph until sunset, either from the deck of the ship or if we can land, you know, relatively early. You don't usually get to land before sunrise or anything, but you do try and get out for the best light.
Okay. Another question from Rand is, are there any issues with condensation on your gear when returning to the boat after being out in the cold?
That's a very good question. And that's one of the nice things about the big rubber bag is that it really does protect the gear from condensation. So what I do is I just pack it up on shore and then I bring it into the boat and I just leave it in there until it warms up. So yeah, it's, you know, has a dual purpose there.
Yeah. Any other questions from anybody? Feel free to unmute yourself or type them in the chat. Type them in the chat box. It was a great presentation, Cheryl. It was really very educational. I made a lot of notes. So
good. Well,
save up all my money.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, honestly, it was, I went on the first trip, you know, that I paid for myself and it took me a while to save for it, but I was so glad I did. I mean, it's really special, so.
Yeah, this was outstanding. I was going to just kind of weigh in on that too. I was jotting down some questions along the way, but each one of those got answered. You were real thorough with everything. And what I really like too is when you're talking about the gear, so many of those things, so many of your recommendations would apply to even just a lot of our nature and outdoor photography out here and that. So I'm jotting some of those things down, and I really hope to be able to bring those down, I should say, to Antarctica one of these days, because there's some of those kind of locations that are sort of on your wish list, and then there's a handful of those that are on the bucket list.
Yes.
And this one just now moved further up that second part of that list, and that. So I really want to do that one soon. So,
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. It's a wonderful, wonderful trip. I mean, there, you know, as photographers, it's a struggle, right? Because there's so many wonderful places to go, and we kind of want to go everywhere. But Antarctica's a special one.
And I know we have a couple people here on this call that have been there. I think Debbie McCullis, I believe, has been there.
Looks like
Rance.
Bridget might have been there.
I
She
just saw Bridget just weighed in on there. So we have a few people that are already ahead of me in this game, but I'll get there one of these days. But this was wonderful. Everything, the photos that you had, the information you provided is really good.
Oh, good. I hope so. And you know, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to just email me. You know, hopefully I answered most of the important questions. But
yeah, and feel free to email me or on announcements for stuff, because we'll post them out to the club, because a lot of folks do like the information and we pass it along. We also have a meetup page which has about 500 people registered to that. So.
oh, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, because it helps to, you know, it's obviously a challenge in terms of marketing to get the word out. So it's really nice when the clubs are able to help us, you know, tell people what we have to offer. But you can also join my mailing list, and you know, I really don't bombard people with emails. I just send things out when I have announcements to make. So that's a good way to keep up with things too.
Very good.
And one of the questions that just popped here on the chat list was, do we have Cheryl's contact information? And your website, I know I looked at that earlier in that, but it's.
Yes, so it's just the easiest way to find all of my contact information is just to go to my website, which is CherylOpperman.com. And I think you guys have it listed on your webpage right now. I don't know how long you tend to leave that up there, but
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we do have that on our webpage as far as this presentation and that. So I'm sure that will still stay up there.
So if you go to my website, you can find my email address and my phone number, and you know, the other thing I will mention too is if you email me and I do not answer you, please just call me. I actually really like phone calls. I think phone calls are great, and email is not always reliable. I mean, things go into the spam folder or they disappear in the cloud. And so if I don't get your email or if I don't answer it, just call me, because I want to know, you know, I want to know that it's somewhere, and I want to get back to you. So don't hesitate to pick up the phone.
Scary. Talk to somebody.
I know. Isn't that a great concept? Yeah.
Figure out how to do that.
You use this to talk on? What?
I know.
And aside from that, I don't see any other questions. Most of it just in the chat room. It's just all comments such as, that was spectacular, this was fantastic. So everybody was really, as I can understand, very appreciative of everything.
Well, I see them now. I'm in the chat room. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for having me. I would be glad to speak to your club again at some point. So.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute, because we were like, oh, what are we going to do here? So I appreciate your taking the time and having something ready for us. It was great.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I'm glad to do it. So stay safe, everybody, and we'll get through this. And I know we're all anxious to travel again, so I hope to see you all out there as soon as possible. And yeah, it's a difficult time, but hopefully we can see a light at the end of the tunnel here. So
yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
We want to get back to fun.
Yes, everybody does. I think we're all tired of being stuck at home and inside so much. And
yeah. We're too close to our children. That's the big problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael, anything else?
I didn't have anything else. So that was it. We'll leave the meeting now. But again, and I also just wanted to thank everybody for joining in tonight. You brought a really big crowd tonight. We had a really good attendance in that. So it's something.
And one other thing, I don't know if I mentioned in the email, Cheryl, you're now a member of the club. That's one of the perks. So,
yes, I saw that. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Glad to be a part of it.
So we'll rely heavily on you. We'll vote you on the board, and you'll be.
There we go.
Great.
All right. Well, if we'll give everybody a few minutes off tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks again. This session will be recorded and put up on YouTube probably in the next few days. We'll send everybody a link.
Great. And thanks for setting that up, Bruce. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a great night. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.